so it was really interesting. Thank you. So, without much ado, a little bit about cyber resilience and Optimising IT to start. So, as a business, actually, we're relatively young. MSP, we were formed in 2013 as an entity that provides managed services. We're based up near Gloucester, just as an organisation, so we're quite focused on the Gloucestershire and surrounding areas from a customer service point of view. Got to say it, we're a recent Cheltenham Town sponsor, so a few of the team are quite big football fans and like the local town, Cheltenham Town, so we sponsored a stand there, which has been an interesting experience. And for us, being cyber focused is all about, and Simon mentioned this in his presentation, all about risk mitigation for us and our customers. So, over the past number of years, there's been a big focus on cybersecurity in industry at large, as well as focus on MSPs. And for us, it's all about looking at that from a pragmatic point of view and minimising risk down to a level which we feel comfortable with, both for us and for our customers. So ultimately, I think, rightly or wrongly, a lot of customers look at IT, especially IT service providers, is the go-to source of all truth regarding cybersecurity. So therefore, I think there's a kind of an incumbent expectation to be doing the right things at the right time, regardless of whether or not it's levels of responsibility. So it's about that. And again, someone hit the nail on the head with communication. It's all about communicating the right things at the right time. So a little bit about that. So moving on, what is cyber resilience? So that's probably good just to get that out there in terms of what we're talking about. So for me, cyber resilience is the ability to survive, if you like, whenever there's a cyber incident. So looking at that from an MSP point of view, what we're looking at here is saying, right, when there's a challenge, when there's an incident in the cybersecurity nature, how do we continue to operate and provide the same level of high quality service to our customers, regardless of the weather, fundamentally? Or to put it another way, just something maybe a little topical, is what happens when your RMN tool is hacked? So this isn't just a question for MSPs, it's a question for anybody who uses an RMN tool, particularly one which is provided by the different third parties. And there's a number that have had challenges over recent time. And I thought later on we'll explore a little bit about some of the implications of that, if you like, moving forward. But it's actually really, really key. So what happens when one of the key services or platforms that you use as an organization to deliver service is unavailable for some reason, be that whether it's distributing ransomware or just it's not available for use for whatever reason? How do you continue providing service? Well, actually, a key thing for me on this particular piece is, I'm actually in the right place here, how you approach that, right? So for me, it's all about the planning, fundamentally. So just go through this kind of plan, if you like. So what we're really talking about doing here is going, well, actually, what is our approach to cyber resilience? And then go, what is our approach to risk, fundamentally? So if we're talking about something in the information security space, typically we're talking about risk appetite. What is our organization risk appetite? Now, for us as an organization, we're very, very risk averse. There's no punches there, absolutely not. So wherever we can, we'll try and minimize risk down to the minimal possible level that we define to be acceptable, which is low. We're a risk averse organization. Not all organizations are risk averse. Some are quite happy to take a risk in this space. Perhaps question that a little bit in the current market, given some of the things that have gone on from a market space point of view. In order to do that, we need to understand where our risks are. So this is one of the key things that we go through whenever we're looking at a new system, a new platform, even a new customer. We'll go, well, actually, where are the risks? Right? Where are we potentially exposed from a cyber perspective here? And what platforms are they using? If you've taken on a customer which is still running Server 2008, there's a few of those out there, for example. Do they have any resilience in their environment? Should they be doing something else? And that's a journey to get that into the right space, definitely. Which risks do we have to accept? Which ones have we got no choice but to accept? Which ones can we mitigate? These are all key questions. So every time a change happens or something like that, these are the key things that we look at as an organisation in order to be able to understand where we are and what our plan is, if you like. The next one's really straightforward, he says. So this is carry out risk mitigation. So this is where we look at the risk that we understand after that second phase there. and reduce them. We do something about the risks. When you reach the end of all the activities that you can do around reducing risk to a level which you find comfortable, then you're left with the leftover parts. Those are the ones you have to accept in order to operate, basically. And then the next thing we do then is, after that, is continue to improve. Right? So this is, we keep asking ourselves questions, we keep asking our customers questions around how do we make this better? How do we make it better than it was last week? How do we make it better than it was the month before? And this is all about not being the absolute byword of cybersecurity. This is all about making sure that we're better than we were, ergo we're ahead of the rest of the pack at that point. So you're continually making yourself a harder target. The idea there being that we are trying to encourage those cyber miscreants, if you like, to go and attack somebody who doesn't look quite so robust, and that's the plan. And if we look at that, with an ISO lens, we're actually implementing here something called Plan, Do, Check, Act, or the Deming Cycle, as it's known, which is this wheel of continued improvement. So you start with the plan, you do something around the planning stage, you check and see how that's worked, and then you go back around that loop again and say, well, actually, now we can make it better. So, if you go back in time, say 10, 15 years, long passwords and changing them regularly was a good idea. Now, long passwords, not changing them and implementing at least MFA on all your accounts is the current flavour of the month. But that's an improvement over a long period of time. And that's just one kind of common example, if you like. In practice, so we've been through the plan. What does that actually look like when we are writing this down on a piece of paper or doing a planning exercise, for example? So it's about knowing your risk, right? That's the key point. The fundamental here is understanding what the risks are. I think there's a lot of risk out there in organisations which is unknown. So implicit risk, and organisations implicitly accept those because they don't know they have them. Our job here from a cyber perspective is to uncover those and play those back in a way which enables everybody to accept those risks explicitly or not accept them, and then do something about them. Plan and plan again, right? So I can't underline how important it is to actually stop and think about these things and plan out what the activities are going to be over a period of time, and then plan out, once you've done those, plan out what you're going to do next. Where's the next level of improvement coming from? And I think we're big fans of the 80-20 rule. And once you get into that last 20% of improvements, that's when the effort really kicks in. So that's the part that takes the time. But it's relatively straightforward to do that first initial tranche, if you like, of improvements, because you usually get the biggest bang for buck, so to speak. And then test the plan, right? So I speak to quite a few organisations about, say, disaster recovery or BCP, and I say, great, you've got plans. When did you last test it? And there's usually a big pause, and they say, well, we haven't actually tested it. Okay, great. So I'll give you an example. I was talking to a customer, a potential new customer, a few months ago, who back up their infrastructure to tape. Okay, no problem. The question was, well, when did you last try doing a restore? We haven't had to do a restore in a couple of years. Okay. When was the last time you tested the BCP plan, which is restore everything from tape in your current provider's environment? Yeah, we haven't actually tested that, was the response. Right, okay. So at that point, you don't actually know whether the plan you've got is any good. So testing is really, really key to understand whether what you've planned to do will actually work in any given scenario. And then plan for the what if scenario. So this is the part where we start looking at something called threat modeling, or even just the what if scenario. Right? So this is where we say, well, what if this happens, and what if this happens, and then we write down all of the potential things we might do in any given scenario that we can think. There's always going to be some that fall outside the edges, but if you've got a good basis to start with, you'll be able to react quickly to things that you haven't planned for, and actually, responses tend to fall into broad categories rather than detailed ones when you're into it. And then again, keep improving, right? So this is what we do. We always take a look at things and we keep improving. We're somewhat forced to improve because of our ISO accreditations. Part of that plan, do check out. That's a requirement of maintaining those, but actually that's a good idea. So stuff always moves forward, particularly in IT, and that continual improvement piece where we're trying to you make things better is the kind of the secret sauce, if you like. So we talked a little bit earlier just about the example of the RMM tool. So here's a kind of a few questions that we might use ourselves when we're looking at scenarios and we're testing out that scenario. So we'll take a scenario and say, right, there's been a challenge with an RMM tool, for example, and then we'll ask ourselves a bunch of questions. Right, okay, so what's the risk? What's the likelihood of that happening? Fairly high, we'd say in that particular instance. Is there a data breach? Well, so this is kind of a key thing, really. So when you talk about reporting into the ICO, if there's a data breach under GDPR or something, you need to know that. Okay, so let's investigate that. What's the likelihood of there being a data breach? Okay, and there'll be a whole stream of activities that need to happen off the back of that one question. Are customers affected? Right? So it's entirely possible to have a cyber incident, but not have any customer impact at all. Okay, because cyber incidents can range from I've got a spam email to I don't know, a laptop's been stolen or whatever it might be. So different examples there, but what's the effect on my customers? And they'll go, how do we respond to that? What's our plan of action? Do we have a plan of action? If not, okay, we need to develop one. How might we mitigate this? How can we reduce the risk? So I don't think any MSP would operate particularly efficiently if we didn't have an RMM tool, or you didn't have an RMM tool, for example. But equally, what happens when it's not available for a period? So RMM tool breach might be RMM tool gone offline, or the server that it's hosted on had a hardware failure. So what's the plan around that? What's the recovery time? How do we look at those things? Lots of questions. And this is the key to this, really, is going in any particular instance of service delivery, what happens in ? And we get a group of people in from the organisation, across departments, and we ask that question because everybody asks different questions, and you tend to get a very good basis from which to proceed on. But that's really the key to it, is asking the questions and then testing the scenario, testing those responses, even if you do it at desktop level. Testing out what happens, getting people to test the robustness of the responses, and then you improve that over a period of time. So moving on, a little bit about how we do cyber at Optimising IT. So I think it'd be fun just to share some of the things that we do at a high level. So planning, training, backup, testing, review, planning. So you can see where this is going. We're continually looking at this, and we actually have a couple of people that are dedicated to doing that continual improvement piece across the business, which is really, really useful. As a business, we're 100% cloud-based, so we actually don't have any servers as an MSP. Slightly advantageously, being a relatively young business, we were able to start off in the cloud, so therefore we've kept going, and that's how we operate. And that's all about simplicity. So one of the key things here, a bit like Lotus or Tesla, if you don't need a part or a process, don't have it. Reason for that being, if you don't have it, it can't go wrong. So that tends to work. So wherever we can, we'll keep things as simple as possible. And we also try and minimize suppliers and supply chain risk. So one of the big pools of risk out there for any organization is your supply chain. So whilst you can control things that are in your sphere of influence, it's much more difficult to control other organizations and other people's delivery models. So I think, the less suppliers you have in the chain and the less different types of technology you use, the much easier it is to manage things moving forwards. External validation. So this is really, really key, I think, for us. So I think there's a lot of, you can talk a lot about cybersecurity and about, absolutely, if people are focused on it, great. Well, if we're doing that and we've got these processes and systems in place, let's actually get some external validation on that. So that for me is really, really key. So talking a good game is one thing, actually doing it is something else. So we seek external validation on those things, with external audit, just to make sure that actually we're not missing anything ourselves. And I think that's really good. That's really key as well in terms of playing back that picture to our customers, that we take it seriously. And customer information sharing as well. So that whole kind of piece around making sure that we tell our customers what we're doing, and also informing them when we think they should be doing something to improve their cybersecurity. Surprisingly, out in the market space, a lot of organizations probably still aren't taking this quite as seriously as perhaps they should. But I think things are improving. Things are definitely getting better at that. There's a little bit more information about some of the things that we do. So I'll pick out some of the key ones here. So MFA is kind of a given. So MFA on everything. Supplier management. One of the key things that we do as well here is minimization of account privilege. I can get my words out right there. So Within Cyber Essentials, there's a piece around this in particular. So this is about that concept of, well, if you don't need access to something to perform your job role, don't have access to it, again, delete the part, delete the process kind of mentality. Give you an example of that. I've had this current laptop for just about a year. I've never had to log into it using an administration account. So my account does not have administration privileges on my local machine because I don't need it. So therefore I don't have it. Ergo, if there is a challenge there at any particular point, that level of privilege can't be leveraged to cause a problem. And then some of the other stuff in here is kind of, just good stuff. So keep a risk register if you've got ISO 27001, that's kind of fundamental. Backups, yep, that's kind of key. And keep an eye on our resources. There's a couple of resources out there on the internet in terms of open source intelligence. What does our digital footprint look like to a potential attacker? If it looks less good, actually that might look like a bit of a target to somebody. If it looks really good, it might turn off your casual kind of attacker a little bit. You think, well, actually, there doesn't look like there's a lot of scope there. And a key thing here for me, really, and this is in no broad brushstrokes or anything else like that, is that the approach that any organisation takes to cybersecurity or being resilient in cyberspace is the context of the organisation and the risk appetite. So ultimately, if there's a decision at the top to accept risk, that's absolutely fine. Tick. I think very much more so now. I think risk management and information security, and certainly around the cyber resilience piece, is very much more a case of well, if it can happen, it will. So therefore, we need to plan for that much more than just accepting a risk that it'd be unlikely. I think these days that's probably not quite enough in that particular space. But that's about it from me, actually. Is a structured presentation. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, everyone. Yeah, I think Tessa, time for some questions if there's any. If not, thank you very much all.
Yeah, absolutely lovely. Thank you very much, Todd. That was really insightful. Yeah,
No
have a couple of questions for you. I suppose the first one is around, I suppose, the priority of security and cyber resilience has probably changed. The landscape has probably changed quite a lot in the last few years. Why do you think that is? And has it changed, perhaps?
Has it changed? I think if we're talking historically, I think it was always there. I think the number of incidents and the severity of incidents have changed, and I think as we moved more towards shared infrastructure, certainly with cloud and a lot more kind of outsourced activity. If we look at some of the recent environmental challenges, actually it's a big opportunity for attackers out there. So I think that is predicated on one thing and one thing only, largely, which is financial. So ultimately the majority of hackers are criminals. They're after money. How can they monetize organizations, and how can they get the biggest hit, if you like, fundamentally? So I think that's why such a focus on phishing for a lot of organizations, because it's easy to do. You don't need any technical skill. Much easier to hack a person than a firewall or a server that's out there on the internet in most instances. So that's the focus on that, and I think it's coming up the priority chain for a lot of organizations, because they've either had an incident, which we see quite often, where somebody might phone us up after there's been a problem and ask for some help, or they're aware that they're getting some sort of industry pressure or regulatory type pressure. Certainly if you're in financial services or regulated by the FCA or the PRA, whatever it is, there's a lot of pressure from that entity on regulated organizations to kind of improve their game. And there's a massive reputational challenge now as well, much more so than there was a few years ago, in terms of the public's much more aware around this stuff, and online shops getting hacked, for example, credit card data going missing. I think there's been quite a lot of famous examples around that sort of stuff. It's impacting the person in the street who's kind of at the end of the chain, if you like. So therefore there's a lot more public interest in this sort of thing.
So lots of pressures coming from different groups, different communities, different stakeholders. So do you find that based on that, are you finding organizations being more proactive? So you talked about making sure you test the plan, and you say, when was the last time you tested it? And they go, and everyone kind of looks a bit, kind of shuffles around a bit, and no one can really answer. So you find, I suppose, how frequently would you recommend organizations test these plans for kind of their resilience?
That's a great question, because that goes back to context, right? So I think if you are a 10-person marketing agency that design marketing websites, you probably want to test that once a year. Would be a reasonable thing. And actually your plan might be, well, I can't use the office, for example, right? So that, an availability piece, the office is gone for whatever reason, and that's obviously quite topical at the moment. So therefore, we'll try and work from home. Are you geared up from that? What happens if the people that you host most of your websites with, have an incident themselves? What's the backup plan? Well, I've got a backup copy of all the websites. I tell you what, as a test, once a year, we'll take a sample of 5% of those and try and restore those on another web service provider and see if we can bring them up in a short period of time. You don't have to make them live. You don't have to, go through the whole piece of moving DNS entries and things around. But can I take the backups that I've got and make them available? Okay, so that might be a thing there. I think if you are a 300-person insurance company, with lots of, say, medical data or something like that, then you might want to look at maybe a quarterly test or a 6-monthly test, and you're going to want to move that around departments or systems because you can be a much bigger, much more complicated entity. So I think that's really good to demonstrate the context of your organisation and your risk level, and that's it.
Okay.
I think
That's fabulous. And I suppose perhaps the last question, I don't know, is there one piece of advice that organisations typically come to? What's the top thing that an organisation comes to and says, we really need help because? Is there something that they come to you typically for that has been prevalent recently?
Yeah, I think most recently the biggest questions we get are, do I know where I am? So a lot of organisations actually don't know where they are from a yardstick, if you like. From where's the waterline? Am I above or below whatever the waterline is? And I think the challenge, the watermark's doing this, going up all the time, and so sometimes there's a bit of a stretch to get there. I think on that particular piece, standards help, right? So we talked to a lot of people about Cyber Essentials in terms of, right, well, there's a good benchmark because it's well recognized, and you're at least being seen to be doing the right things. I think challengingly 8 out of 10 organizations I probably go and talk to that have got a certificate probably don't meet all the criteria for whatever reason. So I think someone's filled out the questionnaire correctly with the right answers but hasn't actually done some of the work. And the more complex an organization is, the more difficult that is to hit that standard. So again, that certification piece kicks in there, but yeah, definitely where are we is the key question.
Okay, lovely. Well, I think that's probably the last of our questions for today. So thank you very much for joining us, Todd. It was absolutely lovely.